Hello people, I am going to explain how the IRC domain communication system works, and I'm going to do it in the context of something that's quite complex. This is the oxygen system on the Mars RP zones, and I'm currently in the Mars laboratory. So you can see there's all sorts of things here that I'm playing around with. Now, this mat that I'm standing on is actually representing a dome. So if you're in a dome, you're in a safe area. And as you can see, my health and oxygen up here are at 100%, which is good. Now, this is also reflected in the heart here and also over here. So you can't miss it. Right, that's the idea anyway. We shall see. Anyway, now I'm in a safe zone, and so my health and oxygen immediately go to 100%. If I walk off, and you can see it down here, it says you're currently outside a safe zone, and up here on the HUD, you can see my oxygen is already depleting. Now, it doesn't deplete very fast, but it does deplete, and once it's all gone, then the health starts to deplete, and when it gets to 0, you're dead and you get teleported somewhere where you want to be. So let me go back in this. I'm now in a safe zone and my health immediately goes back up to 100. So you don't have to wait more than 4 seconds once you get back into a safe zone. Oh, hello, he's come to see me. Alright, okay, now go about your business. Right, now, so how does this work? Well, the HUD doesn't actually do much. All it's doing is reporting what the central server is telling you. Let me just turn this thing off because it's making so much noise. Right, now, the central server is actually monitoring the health, and it's on a different region. And so all the HUD is doing is 2 things. It will tell you, report what the central server says your health and oxygen levels are, and it will report to the region server, or it will report to the central server what your protection level is. So that will be either biological for organic creatures and or organic, let's call it organic, and then there are cybernetic organisms, which are enhanced organics, and then there are machines. And I'm currently set as an organic, and I can do that by calling up my status. It says my protection is organic, health decay rate 0.2 per second, and it's updated at 10 seconds. And if I change that to cybernetic, now my protection is cybernetic, and the decay rate is 0.1 second, so it's half the decay rate of an organic. And for machines, well, they don't really care about oxygen, so their decay rate is 0, and their oxygen levels and their health never decrease. So it'll stay like this even if I go outside, which I can just show you. And it says now I'm currently outside a safe zone. and nothing happens. The oxygen and health stay exactly the same. But if I were to change that to organic, then things start to happen. And all I have to do is wait until the next ticks are 10 seconds apart, and there it goes. My oxygen levels go down. And if I go back into a safe zone, within 4 seconds, it's back up to 100. Now, the question is, how does the HUD contact the central server if it's in a different region? Well, one way to do this is to use HTTP in. This is where the central server sets up sets itself up as a web server, and the HUD can then use HTTP to communicate with it. But then the HUD would also need to set itself up as a web server so that the central server could send it updates. And this is very inconvenient. And also, it precludes the idea that someone might be wandering around without a HUD. So the central server actually needs to monitor everyone in the RP zones, whether they're wearing a HUD or not. So what we do is we use regional hubs, and these act as relays. And in this manner, the HUD can contact the local hub, and it can then forward the message to the central server. The central server disseminates information to the hubs, and the hubs forward them to the HUD. There you go, nice and simple. And so the question is, how do the HUDs and the central server communicate if they're not using HTTP? They use IRC. So there's a server, one of the local hubs. So if I go to the tab here, you can see that in a description, it set itself up in the group Mars RP, and it sets itself with a name of Mars Lab. So in internet domain names, the top level domain is on the right of any sequence of names, right, separated by dots. So if you take Microsoft.com, the com is the top level domain, and Microsoft is a sub-level. And this, what we're doing here is more or less the same thing, but we're doing it the other way around. The top level is on the left, not the right. So all the hubs are in the Mars RP group, and they each have individual names. They have to be unique. So I'm naming them after the region. So you can see up here the region is Mars Lab. So this one's called Mars Lab. And they communicate via IRC. So this IRC client is a black box script. You never need to edit it. Just drop it in, and that will handle communications to and from other objects. And if they're in the same region, then you can't send them a message via IRC because the entire region has one IRC handle, so it can't hear itself, and so it handles sending the message using a region say. So it doesn't matter whether the objects it wants to talk to are in the same region or in other regions. Because it's by IRC, they could actually be in other grids. As long as the regions that they're in is configured correctly to use the same IRC channels, then they can talk to each other. So all the magic happens there, but we have a user script. And what this does is it allows you to configure messages and handling the messages and the sending of messages based on your particular needs. So in this particular case, it's forwarding messages to and from the central server. Now, as part of this messaging, the central server will send back details about the entire zone. So you can see here, this prim back here is just so that we can read these easily against the orange sky. And the region agents is 1 and NPCs is 0. So the agent is, of course, me. Hello. And the information for the RP zone agents, there is another agent. This number includes myself. So there's me and another agent in the regions. And that happens to be one of my other avatars, Rigged Voter. And there are 5 NPCs active. Now there are 21, 22, 23 regions in the Mars RP zones. So this gives you a good idea of how many people are actually using the RP zones. Just a handy little thing. So this hub will monitor everyone in the region, and in that way it can pick up people who are not wearing the HUD. But if you are wearing the HUD when you enter the region or put on the HUD, it will immediately announce itself to the local hub, and the hub will then inform the central server of your protection status, whether it's organic, cybernetic or machine, and whether you're currently in a safe zone. So the safe zones are set up in a note card, and you have a type followed by a location, and then there's another parameter. For a dome, the location is the center of the base, so the middle of the floor, if you like. And the second parameter is the radius of the floor. You could also have a cube. A cube has is defined by a top left and bottom right corner, which must be, orthogonally opposite. So if you supply just two opposite corners, that's sufficient. It will normalize them into a top left and bottom right. It's fairly straightforward mathematics. So domes and cubes. Cubes might be a space station or a lava tube city, that kind of thing. And there are other ones like, I don't have one here, but an oxygenator. When you sit on an oxygenator, that immediately becomes a temporary safe zone for as long as you're sitting on it. And it will detect, the region hub will detect that. So what happens is the hub sees where you are, whether you're safe or whether you're not. And if your safe status changes, it sends a message to the IRC channel, which then goes into the IRC system, and then the region where the central server is can then read that information, and in fact every object which is connected to this system, the IRC system, will be able to read those messages, and the messages are addressed to groups or specific objects using that domain name that I showed you earlier. So if the central server wants to send a message to this particular server, it would give it the address marsrp.marslab. And if it wants to send it to all the regional hubs, it would send it out to marsrp.asterisk. And if it wants to send it out to a completely different set of objects, then it wouldn't use marsrp, it would use a different moniker. Now this is really, really efficient. Every object can determine exceedingly quickly whether or not the message is intended for it or not. When an object sends a message to the central server, the sender details are carried along with that message, and the sender details are the address like marsrp.marslab, and also the region that it came from. So when you send a message in response to one that you've received, you can send it specifically to that machine using the same sender details, and the first thing that every object that receives the message will do is check, is it for the same region as I am in? And of course most of them will say no, and then they just discard the message. So only if the message was sent to marslab, then only objects in this region would ever get further than that, and then they would check, what about the actual address? Is it addressed to marsrp.marslab? And if it is, then it's meant for this particular regional hub, and only then will it be passed to the user script. So the black box does all the donkey work, and The user script only receives the messages that are intended for it. It's a very, very efficient process and exceedingly fast. I'm running an IRC server within my local network. No one from the outside world has access to it. So it's safe, it's password protected, and there are two passwords. You have to have the password for the logging into the server, and you also have to have the password to use the IRC bridge, which comes as part of OpenSimulator. So if you don't supply the correct credentials, you're going to get nowhere. It's so fast, so efficient. So if my status changes or I leave the region, then the central server gets a notification. If I enter a region, it gets a notification. If I leave a region and I haven't entered another region, then the central server will put a 60-second timer on my record, and if it picks up that record at any point and the timer has expired, then it would just delete the record. Nothing is stored on a database. Now, if I've actually reported in at another region before this one says that I've left, then the system will say, we can't make any adjustments because we can only apply adjustments that are coming from the region that they're in. And we've already recorded that we're in another region. So it's a fairly simple and safe mechanism. And that is how the HUD and the IRC system work together. And it's ready to roll out. And all I've got to do now is build the RP zone, which, as I said, is over 260 regions in size. So, well, 263 grid coordinates. So it's quite big. Yeah, 260, 264, 265, he says quickly, totaling it all up. But there we go. We shall be opening up. And what I'm going to do is, as each region is more or less complete, then I shall open it up and then move on to the next one. So you can come visit, you can start exploring, and you can have fun. Alrighty. I have no idea what my next video is going to be about. But if you've got any suggestions, I'm willing to listen. Alright, thank you very much.